In this video, we'll talk through how to approach Eduqas English Language Component 2, Question 2. With this being the second question, you're still looking at the first source. That's because the first two questions are always about source A, the second two are always about source B, and the final two are always about both texts. With question 2, you'll likely be given a how question testing AO2. Remember, that's your ability to explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers, using relevant subject terminology to support your views. This is similar to the AO2 questions on Component 1, which were impressions questions and how questions. So there's nothing new to worry about here. But just remember, this is a non-fiction or factual text, so you're likely to identify some different points than you would in a piece of fiction. This type of question will ask you to focus on a particular effect or finished product, and how the writer has created it. So you need to make sure you fully understand what we mean by effect. An effect is something that's produced. It's the cause, result, or consequence of an accumulation of things. So when reading through a non-fiction piece, you're looking for content, otherwise known as what the writer says, and language, essentially how they get their ideas across. These are the things that come together to create the final effect or product. Think about it like a series of ingredients that come together to make a dish. For example, when things like flour, eggs, and sugar are combined, they produce a cake. Start by looking at the question. Identify the verb, the doing word, and the adjectives, the describing words. There might be one adjective, or more than one. In any question of this type, the verb will be a synonym for the same thing: show, make, or persuade. All of these words are concerned with the writer's active choices, what they decided to do. The adjectives in the question are the result of their choices, the effect. The writer's choices have come together to achieve a desired effect, to show something as exciting, tense, dramatic, difficult, cruel, shocking, and so on. So, how does this look as a question? Let's take an example. How does the writer try to show that celebrities' dressing room demands are excessive? The verb in this question is show, and the adjective is excessive, meaning over the top or unreasonable. So as you read through the extract, you'll be looking for any methods the writer uses to show extreme demands. This can either be through what they say, which we also call the content, or through language, basically how they say it. But you need to look at both if you want to achieve the top bands. Content is the easier of the two to comment on because it's more obvious. When you comment on language, though, you're showing off a deeper level of understanding to the examiners. So now we've looked at and broken down the question, let's move on to how to structure your answer. As you'll have already read through source A once by this point in the exam, you shouldn't need to do so again. But you might feel you'd benefit from spending some time highlighting the extract for evidence in relation to the question, to help direct your focus. This is fine, you should do whatever is going to help you accurately respond to the question. So, to structure your response, first, answer the question. What has the writer said? This will either be content or language focused. If you're talking about language and you see it as appropriate, you may want to identify subject terminology. Remember, subject terminology means giving things their correct name, such as verbs, adjectives, metaphors, personification, and so on. It's appropriate if it's the identified technique that has created the intended effect. For example, the verb insists highlights their demanding nature. There is no negotiation or compromise. Here, it's the verb that creates this impression. But you need to be cautious here. Don't lead your response by identifying subject terminology. Eduqas aren't in favour of technique spotting, meaning just pointing out and naming techniques the writer has used. Instead, they're more interested in your understanding of a text and the writer's craft. So, next, you need to find a quote to evidence your answer. Which evidence best proves your argument? Finally, explain how the quote proves your opinion. In an answer, your response might look something like this. Firstly, the writer shows that celebrities' dressing room demands are excessive when they stipulate every desire down to the specific temperature of the room. She insists on a constant temperature of 78 degrees. The verb insists highlights their demanding nature. There is no negotiation or compromise. It must be this temperature. As you can see, this answer is focused on the question. The argument is supported with evidence and explains how the evidence proves the argument. Indicating your points with connectives, such as firstly, will make it easier for an examiner to track through your response. For a 10-mark question like this, you'd need to make roughly 8 or 9 different points supported by different evidence. So let's look at some top tips for this question. Open your response with an overview. In what main way has the writer achieved their desired outcome? Don't be too specific here. You can talk about particular techniques later on. For an overview, it's a good idea to focus on the content, what the writer says, not how they say it. Avoid driving your response by spotting techniques. Focus more on what your evidence does. What does your evidence suggest in relation to the question? Don't comment on the reader unless it's going to add value to your response. Think about whether the point you're making is vague and could be applied to any response to any extract. If this is the case, don't include it. Finally, don't repeat the same points or evidence. You can't be awarded more marks for saying the same things more than once. So, it would be a great idea now to practice this approach for yourself to see how it works. Why not have a go using the Eduqas style Component 2 paper that's attached to this pod? Good luck!